Hello and welcome to Network Africa with me, Cynthia Are. Now, yesterday we did tell you that 20 to 30 people lost their lives in the search for greener pastures while traveling illegally via sea from Libya to Italy. Unfortunately, today the number of people feared dead has escalated to as high as 200 to 300. According to the UNHCR spokeswoman Carlotta Sami, 9 people were saved after 4 days at sea, but the other 203 were not so lucky as they were swallowed by the waves. The 2 boats involved in the latest tragedy had departed from the Libyan coast on Saturday, with each boat carrying more than 100 people when they capsized, probably on Monday. All 9 survivors are believed to be French-speaking West Africans. Now, we'll bring you more on that story, but we need to focus on South Sudan right now. Barely a week after a power-sharing deal was signed by the South Sudan president and his sacked deputy, rebels in South Sudan stormed towns in 2 states on Tuesday, but were repulsed. Thousands of people have been killed and over 1 million have fled their homes since fighting erupted in the world's newest nation in December 2013, triggered by a power struggle between the President Salva Kiir and his former Vice President Riek Machar. A January 2014 ceasefire was broken frequently and peace talks often faltered, frustrating South Sudan's Western backers. Philip Aguirre, who's the spokesman for South Sudan's army, the SPLA, said Tuesday's attacks had occurred in Bentiu, that's the capital of oil-producing Unity State, and in Upper Nile, both in the north of the country. Now, earlier on, I was able to reach the SPLA spokesperson, that's Philip Aguirre, via telephone, and I started out by asking him if what we were hearing about fighting in some parts of the country was true. Now, we'll have that interview for you in a moment, but now we go live to Washington, D.C., where the Voice of America's John Tanza, who's the editor of the South Sudan in Focus program, is standing by. John, thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Now, despite the power-sharing deal, which happened just last week, we seem to be back to square one. What's happening?
Well, you see, when 2 parties are fighting over one thing, you expect that to happen. Of course, they signed a power-sharing deal last week, but these 2 groups are fighting for control of areas so that they can use those areas for, bargaining chip at the next round of the negotiations, which is deemed as crucial because the regions have given the 2 parties the last chance to negotiate and solve the crisis by March 5th. So it's not surprising that each group is accusing the other of attacking first. But this is a typical behavior of people who are involved in conflict.
Now, even though there's a blame game going on, is there any word on which side breached the agreement this time around?
Well, when you ask the rebels, they will say the government forces attacked them first. When you ask the government forces, they will say the rebels attacked them first. You don't know who is attacking who first, but the reality on the ground is that both sides are massing their troops in strategic areas. You have to know that Bentiu is an oil-producing area, and Upper Nile is also oil-producing area, and South Sudan depends mainly on oil revenue. So these 2 groups are struggling to take control of oil fields so that they could use that as a bargaining chip at the negotiation table.
Now, it's one thing to sign a deal, another to implement it. Could it be that there is no proper setup in place to ensure that the deal, whether it's a power-sharing deal or a peace deal, is seen through?
Well, to say there's no proper setup is an understatement, because the IGAD mediated talks has set everything clear. It is the 2 parties who have been taking their time, so to speak, in implementing some of the issues that are spelled out in the agreement. One example is they signed a cessation of hostilities in January last year, but they kept attacking each other until today. So the issue is not with the agreement and the people behind the peace talks, but the issue is with the 2 parties. Their behaviors outside the peace talks is different from what they do when they sit on the table talking.
Well, thank you so much, John Tanza, the editor of South Sudan in Focus program for the Voice of America. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Well, I did tell you that earlier on I got a chance to speak to the SPLA spokesperson, Philip Aguirre, and I did start by asking him if what we're hearing about some fighting in parts of the country was true. And here's what he had to say.
Yes, the forces of Riek Machar have not stopped fighting on attacking SPLA position. And yesterday they conducted two attacks, one by shelling Bellevue, town that is SPLA position in Unity State, and by attacking a place called Obudu in Upper Nile. Both attacks have been repulsed by the SPLA. The SPLA remain committed to the ceasefire, and we are only fighting in self-defense.
Okay, so what is the situation on ground right now, please?
The situation is relatively calm, but tension is there as long as forces of Riek Machar are mobilizing for more attacks. The SPLA will not allow them to continue indefinitely disregarding the IGAD negotiated ceasefire. If the IGAD do not prevail on the forces of Riek Machar, definitely the army will have to retaliate.
That was the voice of the SPLA spokesperson, Philip Aguirre. Now back to our top story concerning the 200 to 300 people who are feared dead after traveling illegally via sea from Libya to Italy. Now concerning that, many organizations and individuals alike are looking for ways to contribute their own quota and bringing incidents like this to a halt, or at least minimizing them to the barest minimum. One of such organizations is the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, that's the UNHCR, which attributed the latest tragedy to the European Union needing to do more to save lives. The incident has reignited criticism of the Italian government's decision to end a full-scale search and rescue mission last year.
Speaking in reference to the incident, spokeswoman for the UNHCR, Carlotta Sami, said further deaths should be expected as more people attempt the dangerous crossing.
On Sunday, the Italian Coast Guard in Lampedusa received a distress call from a satellite phone. It was coming from a dinghy with many refugees and migrants that have left from Libya. They were sub-Saharan African. They reached them after many hours because the condition of the sea were really rough.